one of the unique things about this situation, right, is that it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you as athletes were not put in a situation where you could win more, right? Because I'm reading in the article that was done, the investigation that was done by Scott Reed at the Orange County Register and the Southern California News Group. You know, that was a tough read, right? That was over what 10,000, almost 11,000 words of very specific, you know, allegations and such. And you know, there we'll post the link so that our viewers can check that out. That's a really good place to start. But I feel like after reading that, you know, and listening to you, because you clearly have an understanding of exactly what good coaching, you know, and hard coaching and tough coaching, right, looks like, right? You know, you're no stranger to any of that. But I feel like when you read things like, you know, you all were at different points in time this season denied food. That's a big one, right? Because if you can't fuel your body, certainly you're not, you know, going to be able to perform, right? That goes beyond, you know, anybody telling you to jump higher or block better or pass more efficiently or, you know, anything like that. It's like, well, okay, if you're seeing stars, you know, while you're on the court because you're nutrition deprived, like that's a whole, you know, you're already starting kind of, you know, behind, you know, where you should be. So I feel like, you know, Jeremy, and this is one of those situations that we've seen, you and I've seen quite a bit, right, with other programs, and you can really just slot in any sport, right, not just with volleyball, but almost any sport that we see this type of situation. This is about the worst I've ever seen, to be honest. And I, you know, I really say that with so much respect for you, Emma, and your teammates for, you know, coming forward and using your voice, right, to say like, hey, something's not right here. Like we do know better than, you know, than what we're seeing, because there is a distinction between tough, hard, disciplined coaching. There's a lot of that, you know, in huge numbers. There's a difference between that and flat, outright abusive coaching, right, for no purpose other than to exert power over athletes or, you know, whatever the case may be. So what I see in this situation is, you know, really like whether or not you're having a winning season is really sort of irrelevant, right? Because, you know, before you could even get to the court, it seems like these things, you know, reading everything that you all went through, right, and your official complaint to the university, and then also taking into consideration that, well, you said there were 13 in the year that you started, which was the current head coach's second year, there were 13 new players. Well, there are only 18 spots on the roster, right? So 13 player turnover is exceptional, just if you want to go, you know, by the numbers, right, technically by the numbers. That's a, you know, that's a red flag. You know, if there were a lot of underclassmen, you know, and you coming in as a transfer and not a graduate transfer, right, taking a COVID year, but just a transfer, right, still in your eligibility window, and everybody's a freshman and a sophomore or coming from outside of the U.S., well, that's a bit of a red flag too, right? And despite what's acceptable coaching in Europe, you know, I know a lot of European coaches that are tough and disciplined, and I don't know any of them that abuse their players in that way, right? Or deny their players food or, you know, God forbid, like not give you the tools that you need, right, to be successful. So, I mean, I just want to make that point because it's a really important point in this whole situation that's happening at the University of Idaho is that, you know, these athletes were not even given, you know, based on what we're reading and what, you know, what the athletes are saying themselves, like they weren't even given a chance or put in a position to be successful, right? Even if the technical side of the coaching information, you know, is solid and, you know, if it was helpful, I mean, physically speaking, you know, the things that these athletes endured would definitely not only affect them in an athletic way, but would affect them as human beings, right? Emotionally, mentally, like how do you upkeep your classwork if you're nutrition deprived, right? If you're sore and you're tired and you're fatigued, like how do you even get to class after that? You know, I mean, it's really kind of a different situation than just simply being subjected to, you know, I've read some things like, you know, tough coaching or assistant coaches from the past saying that, oh, they were so scared they were, you know, going to pee down their legs or something like that. Was horrifying to read, right? That is definitely not, you know, something that you would say as a coach or teacher or somebody who's responsible, you know, for athletes in a good way. You know, that's not something that I think I would boast about. that I made you so scared that, and I don't think that that was accurate to be, after hearing all of you, sort of tell your stories over the last several weeks, especially you, Emma, which is great. Um, yeah, Jeremy, I think that's a really big point because you and I have seen this quite often in toxic environments with with teams and companies and and such. And so this is where it gets really difficult because the athletes are not even being given a fair starting point, right? So how do you expect them to perform or even have one win or two wins, right? At that point, it's like a match to match, kind of scenario. But geez, if you don't give them the right tools, how are we expecting them to do anything with what they're given, right? Or not in this case.
Welcome to the Culture and Sports Podcast, where we have discussions about how leadership and organizational culture impact organizational success, team and athlete performance, and the short and long-term mental, physical, and emotional health of athletes. The Culture and Sports Podcast is brought to you by Culture and Sports. Culture and Sports helps sports organizations, teams, coaches, support and front office staff, and athletes understand the importance of leadership and organizational culture and its direct impact to success. Please join Lori Okimura and Dr. Jeremy Piasecki in this season of the Culture and Sports Podcast.
So once I became eligible, after that, I immediately started, which was kind of a surprise to me because during my recruiting calls with coach, he told me pretty just flat out and no wiggle room that he'd already recruited 5 other middles, my position, and that because of my height, I would not see the court. And so going from that to immediately starting and being told that I was the one who was going to be fixing the team, changing everything bad that was happening, was a big difference than what I had been told to expect. And so then, yes, I started, once my eligibility was confirmed, I started a whole bunch of the games. But pretty quickly, once it was clear that one player is not going to be the person to fix the entire team, I would start, be in for 5 points, and then be taken out. And then I would not see the court the rest of the time, which I'm okay with that. Wherever I can be most useful to a team, that is where I want to be. In Alaska, I did not play all that much. We had some amazing athletes in my position that played over me, and I did what I could with my voice, cheering them, encouraging them, everything I could. And so that's, when I'm not on the court, that's what I turn to. But that was just kind of the start of it for me. A lot of other girls experienced some poor treatment basically from the beginning of the season. After some of the first tournaments, he would make what we started to refer to as failure montages of all of the mistakes 1 or 2 players made that weekend or over that travel trip. And the entire team would sit during a team meeting for film where normally we would be watching the other team and learning what we can about them to prepare for our play. We're instead watching 1 or 2 targeted players and the mistakes they made, the errors, the points that were lost that in his mind were because of them. And it was just clip after clip after clip. And he would point out those errors, not in a constructive way where it was, move your feet here better. It was just, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. He had told one of the freshmen, after making a failure montage specifically of her, that every single game she's played, she has set 7 unhittable balls, putting the loss specifically at her feet, telling her that she was not the player that he thought he recruited and that she's making him look bad. And this was fairly commonplace throughout the rest of the season. One of the girls at one point did not travel, and we were told why before she was. And it was because when she was retrieving a ball that had gone off to the side of the gym and bringing it back to the cart, she walked. She bounced the ball, she dilly-dallied, and after that, she did not travel again. And he showed us the video of that over and over again, made the girls watch it 4 or 5 times, asking, what do you see here? What's wrong with this? And all of our assumption was that the problem was in the volleyball, that we were supposed to be watching our practice and figuring out what we were doing wrong, rather than watching one player who wasn't on the court go and retrieve a ball. If some of the girls at the beginning, they questioned some of the decisions. We were given a student athlete, a volleyball specific handbook at the beginning of the season during preseason, which laid out some rules, which laid out things that were very clear, it made sense. We respected them. I think one of them was if it's under 50 degrees that we have to be wearing a sweatshirt. And I was not traveling on this tournament, but one of the girls or the coaches and the team stopped to get food that they had ordered, and they just needed to run into the restaurant and pick it up. And at that point, it was around 56 degrees outside. And the coach said, oh, I want someone who has a sweatshirt. And I don't know the tone of the conversation or how things like that went, but I do know that the coach said, I need someone, why are you guys not wearing sweats? Why are you guys not wearing sweatshirts? I need someone with a jacket on. And the freshman pointed out, in the rule book, I thought it said we don't have to wear coats until it's 50 degrees. And after that, because she questioned the coaches, maybe because she pointed out a discrepancy in what they were saying in the rule book, she did not travel the rest of the year. She did not see the court the rest of the year. And that really impacted her. Incredibly negatively. She went from being one of the most talkative, happy girls on the team to she only spoke when spoken to. She just constantly was visibly not doing well. And everyone had a lot of concern for her because of how quickly it was clear that her mental state was deteriorating. And she's one of the girls who I am so glad got out. She transferred. She is going to a school close to home. And I am so hopeful that she will get to experience something so much better and get the chance to heal.
So, you brought up, about, athletes or players going to pick up food. Do you think at around this point, or do you think it happened way prior? When did you start feeling unsafe, or when do you feel like the team started feeling unsafe? And are those even the correct words to use?
I think that unsafe is a good term to use. One of the reasons why we were very careful in how we proceeded with everything once we once we got the ball rolling was because we felt unsafe and we were really scared for what would happen next. But I think one of the biggest areas of safety that is blatant for everyone to see was on a road trip back. I was not present for this. I heard about it, but our coach in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, one of the assistant coaches was driving 100 miles an hour. We have video proof of this, and it is something that a lot of girls felt incredibly uncomfortable with, especially because this coach her driving was not the most comfortable. She had hit some she'd hit some road signs, curbs were like a magnet to her driving. And so overall not a super cautious driver, especially when players were in the car. But when she was going 100 miles an hour in a 60, she got pulled over by the cops. She ended up not getting a ticket, but was pulled over for speeding significantly. We have pictures, video of the speedometer at 95. And all of this made the girls really uncomfortable. And so that's when we decided to bring it up with the athletics administration. We brought some concerns to people working, some assistant athletic director, and he said that he would deal with it and it would be okay. But in reality, what happened is our coach called a team meeting in the locker room, told us that someone complained to his boss about our assistant coach's driving, and that he knows this because everything gets back to him, implying that, if we made a complaint, if we tried to talk to someone about what was going on here, that it would get back to him and he would know. And he discounted our claims. He told us that he had to tell his boss that we were liars and that our assistant coach is the safest driver that he knows. And it was at this point in time, too, that we realized that we didn't really have any of the coaches on our side, because our assistant coaches were in the locker room there. At any point, she could have said, "No, this is accurate. I was speeding. I did get pulled over." But that wasn't the case. She sat there, let us be blamed, and just kind of talked to in extremely disrespectful ways. And it wasn't quite a threat, but it was the overlooming knowledge that nothing that we did would be private from coach, and that he always had access to the information about what we were saying, what we were doing involving the program, and that it would get back to him. And he would discount it. We could say anything we wanted to, and he would tell his bosses, the athletics administration, that we are liars.
So there was shoving and physical abuse happening on the court from the coach to players. There was super fast driving, unsafe driving. Was there anything with calorie counting or meal preparation or body shaming? Was there anything like that happening?
Not as much during my year. I heard significant stories from the girls who returned, about the food problems that they were having. The food this year was not as limited as it was. We were still given a highly combed through menu options to choose what we would be ordering for the meal that day. And a lot of the times the foods were things that the girls weren't necessarily comfortable eating. This isn't the case for me. I am not a picky eater, but a lot of the times we would be getting dishes and foods from cultures that the girls had not experienced and were not comfortable or wanting to eat, and portion sizes were unknown to them. They were getting way less food. Yeah, yes, they were ordering that dish, but they had no clue how much food would be coming, and oftentimes it would be a cup of soup and stuff like that, which it is not enough to fuel athletes. It wasn't enough to fuel us. Girls would be ordering food after dinner anyways. And based on experiences from the year before, when they did order food, it was with extreme caution, and having girls check the lobby to see if the coaches were there, check the hallway to see if the coaches were there, to make sure that the extra food, the extra meal was not going to be caught, taken away, or them receiving a punishment for. The shoving also occurred the year before me. There was nothing this year that amounted to shoving at that physical level. Every once in a while he would jump in and play with us. He would tell girls sometimes when they tried to do something like, "Oh, there are 2 volleyball players in the world that can successfully do whatever activity. I'm one of them, and you're definitely not the other." And that was pretty common when you would jump in and play with us. And volleyball, although it's not a contact sport between, like, my team and the other team, there's 6 people on 900 some square feet, and we're all moving around, we're all diving after a ball, we're going to come into contact with each other. And when he would jump in the court, he would be a setter, and a lot of positions get really close to making contact with the setter. Your arms will hit. When you're swinging your arms around, they'll bump into each other, and he would just stop the drill, grab the ball, and stare at you as if that was inexcusable, something that wasn't okay. It was, and that's, everyone who plays a sport has an understanding of, especially team sports, you're gonna bump into each other, you're gonna run into each other. But there was nothing this year that amounted to players being shoved over. There were some instances in which some players who had some pretty significant medical issues, physical pain, were verbally forced to continue playing through the pain, doing a specific drill, which caused them even more pain to their injury. But there was nothing that was this year that was players being pushed over. That was last year. It got reported. Nothing was being done. And even the food this year, because it was such a big problem last year, he tried to leverage it against us almost. He would have weekly captains meetings with our captains, and I'm close with the captains. And so they would talk to me after, and I remember after one of the captains came down, and she was talking about the captain's meeting and said that in the conversation, he asked her why we weren't winning. He said, "I'm feeding you guys better. I got you guys shoes because I got you guys different shoes because they were hurting some of your feet. So I'm giving all these things up. Why aren't you giving something up and winning?" And so it was just another eye-opening experience to see really how he viewed us, how he viewed the necessities of being an athlete with proper nutrition and proper equipment as something that he had to give up. And in return for having access to proper equipment and getting proper nutrition, we were supposed to then start winning.
So Emma, I'm sorry to say this. I'm obviously asking you a couple wrong questions because, I've been reading, what Scott Reed from the Orange County Register, has written, and through my our earlier conversation with you, can you explain, your own experiences of where, you felt that it was toxic, because I keep on bringing up things that weren't necessarily directed at you. And so I want to make sure that our listeners best understand your own lived experience. So can you please share a little bit more about your own experiences?
Absolutely. Again, I spoke a little beforehand about how I wasn't on the receiving end of a lot of even criticism, athletic criticism, constructive criticism that a coach would normally be giving the players at the beginning of the season. But I think the most impactful thing that happened specifically to me was right at the very end of the season. We had completed a practice the night before, and the team tried to make it a fun practice. So we didn't wear our team shirts. I don't know if anyone's seen stuff about like the Adam Sandler dress up days, but we just wore baggy shorts and baggy shirts. We wanted to have a fun practice. Just, it's some of the girls on our team's last practice ever, and we wanted to celebrate that and enjoy, or at least try to enjoy playing volleyball. We chose something that was non-restrictive, nothing that would impede our movements. And then somehow that whole situation got incredibly twisted. And at the practice, when our coaches were asking about it, I spoke up for the team. And I tried to stand up for the team against the coaches in a fairly direct way. And after that, it was, I guess the best way to say it was game over for me. Um, Even before I was eligible, I was traveling to some games just in the off chance that I would get my eligibility. I was starting, I would play, um, and then that was the practice right before we left for our last game. And the travel roster didn't come out until the day of our game. And so, I kind of figured that as soon as I spoke up, I wouldn't be traveling based on the other girls' past experiences. And so when the travel roster came out, I saw my name wasn't on it. And it was expected. It was disappointing, but the game was also an hour and a half drive away. And so the other four girls that weren't on the travel roster, we all drove up and saw, our teammates' last game of the season, from not even the sideline, not even the bench. We were up in the stands. And before we even made the drive, one of the girls in a side group chat, one of the captains, texted wondering if we'd be getting food. And this was a group chat with, I think, 5 of us without coaches. And I just said, oh, just send a text in the group chat, just say, hi coaches, I'm wondering if we should bring our own food and eat a lunch before the game, or if we will be fed once we are on the road. And she said, perfect, I'm just going to send that. And I told her in the side group chat, just, joking mood, she's my friend, this is what we do. I said, if you send that, I'm going to send a pig emoji. Like, I'm going to react to it with the message feature as a pig emoji. And so she copied and pasted my message. She sent it in the group chat, and I did just that. And me reacting to messages with strange emojis was not different. It was going on all season. I used the tooth emoji, the seal emoji, the vampire emoji, there's a wide variety of emojis, and I thought it was fun to just acknowledge that I'd seen a text like the coaches requested us do with an emoji, and that is what I did. And never before had it been brought up as a problem. It was never an issue. No one expressed any problems, but around 30 minutes after I sent that text, one of the assistant coaches kicked me out of the group chat. And I didn't hear from her. I didn't hear from any of the coaches. We went to the game. They ignored the people that weren't traveling. We went to go see the last game, and they, stringently avoided making eye contact with us. And after that, I was leaving the next day. I hiked the Grand Canyon rim to rim with my mom. And so that entire time, I still had not heard from coaches. And in my experience, to the best of my knowledge, when you're a part of a group and you are removed from the group's only form of communication by the authority of the group, it means you're out of the group. And so I honestly thought I was off the team. And so I sent an email to some of the support staff, some of the athletics administration, asking for guidance on what I should do. I sent the screenshots of my message telling my teammate I was going to react with an emoji. I was very upfront about everything that happened. And it was only after I sent that email to the administration that one of the coaches texted, let me know when you get back. And that was really it. And so I got back, we had a meeting, and even during that meeting, I felt uncomfortable enough in my position that I asked for the school to provide a support person for that meeting. I did not want it to be with just me and the coaches, so I asked for a support person and for a member of athletics administration to be there, because I knew, I had done nothing wrong. And I didn't know what the meeting was going to be about. They refused to communicate that with me, even though I had asked. And So that was the biggest form of just outright action against me. Um, but like I said, it wasn't, for me, it was not necessarily awful. I wasn't getting coaching. I wasn't being treated with a whole bunch of respect, but I also was not being berated and belittled constantly like my teammates were. And that is something that I really, that's like, it's not okay for anyone to be treated like that, much less people who I hold near and dear to my heart. And seeing my friends and my teammates who, when you're around each other 8+ hours of the day, you see each other more than your family, more than your like blood family, they start to become your family. They become your people in whatever environment you're in. And so even though I was not the one who suffered the most or even close to that, it was something that I felt like I had to take action on. Something had to change, and I was someone who was willing to really make that difference and to start the ball rolling, to start taking steps so that we would receive the help, the assistance, the safety that we needed.
Jeremy, there's a couple of things I just want to highlight, in the story that Emma's sharing with us. And Emma, I really applaud, I don't even know if bravery is the right word. I applaud your authenticity, right? That at some point, like, this isn't right. Something is weird with what I'm seeing, maybe not to you initially at first, but then eventually, you were impacted by it, whether you realize now or 5 years from now, and you're like, hey, you know what, that really bothers me. You were impacted by what was going on around you, right? And your experience, your lived experience, your shared experience with your teammates, is really valid, right? And there's an interesting statistic. You're still in the environment. I mean, perceivably, you're still in the environment which the abuse took place, right? And there's this very interesting statistic that Safe Sport International, which is one of the leading authorities, on safeguarding of athletes and everything, children to adults. They have this fact-based research, that they do, and there was a statistic about if you were abused in your teenage years. Now it's a little younger than where you are now, but if you're abused around age 15 or 16 or so, sometimes it takes until you're 52 years old is the average age to even say anything about it, right? And that's no joke. I mean, I actually have a very dear friend of mine who was abused when she was 15 and a half, and her aha moment didn't actually come. She tried to seek some support, but her aha moment didn't actually come until she was 52 years old, almost exactly, in that year. So first off, I want to just give our listeners an impression of, how important it is that you're using your voice, right? That your voice is also amplifying the voice of your other teammates that you don't even know that were from the University of Idaho last year, and that's another point, I wanted to bring up. We're talking a lot about, um, not only things that happened in your first season at Idaho, which was this last women's volleyball's in the fall, right? So it was 2023 fall season, which was your first. But, to my understanding, and even some things that Scott Reed shared with us in his episode, is that this type of abuse, some of the things that you've shared with us here, that you heard about or witnessed or continued to persist, but also a whole nother group of women athletes at the University of Idaho in the women's volleyball program under the leadership of the athletic director, Terry Golick, the head coach, Chris Gonzalez, all the names that we're hearing that are associated with the people responsible for the duty of care of athletes, right? All of this happened in the year before, in Chris Gonzalez's first season, which was 2022. And, I'm still scratching my head as to why it took, more than a year later for these incidents, right, to really come to light, and also for anybody to notice or acknowledge or take control, right, of the situation. I want to just also flag, Emma's been telling us, Jeremy, a lot about the things that she's seen and experienced herself, and all of that. In reading
Exactly.
the the stories that have now come out, right? The investigate. It took an outside reporter, right, from nowhere near Moscow, Idaho, tiny college community, but very vibrant. I understand, very vibrant college town. Very supportive people. Vandals are, I'm a USC Trojan, and we're as deathly loyal to our alma mater as the Idaho Vandals seem to be, and even more, right? Lots of support for the university, lots of support for the students. Obviously huge, buy-in to the community in Moscow. But what's puzzling to me is why did it take, somebody from outside, so far outside the community, but yet someone, Scott Reed is an award-winning journalist, right? Has covered a number of particularly athlete abuse cases at major universities, whether it be Power Five conference universities or junior college, institutions, like the whole range, and has a lot of experience with this. Why did it take somebody from outside? And so my first question about this to you is that at the point that you and your teammates this year, right, in the 2023 women's volleyball season, at the point that you kind of reached that moment, right, where collectively you're like, okay, guys, this is not working for us, right? We need to figure out where can we go for help. Like what was that moment like for you all? Were you what were you thinking, and maybe what were you feeling? If you could share a little bit of that with us, where do you go for help?
Yeah, it was a topic of discussion for the majority of the season. We'd heard, at least I heard, and the other girls on the team had heard about how girls from the previous season went into the athletic director's office with their own document and their descriptions of how their season went, and parents and other people, alumni from schools 15, 20 years ago where Chris Gonzalez had coached at, wrote to the athletic director to validate and support these young women's claims. And nothing came of that. And we
I'm
knew
sorry, Emma.
that.
Did you just say nothing came of that? Like, is he still
Yes.
coaching right now? Is everything like it was before this meeting? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just
Yeah,
want
so
to clarify that.
this was actually after the end of the 2022 season. So this was after, like, I was not there. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't even committed yet, but this had all happened. They went into the athletic director. They told her everything, and nothing changed. He still was the coach. After that, their roster was also 18 girls, and that shows you how many people left, how many people transferred. A lot of them just quit volleyball as well. They said after this experience, I cannot bear to be around the sport anymore. And so this season, we knew that there probably would not be a whole bunch of support coming from athletics administration, or that at least there was a risk from that. And so pretty early on, we started keeping track of everything, keeping track of when the captains' meetings were, what the captains spoke to coaches about, what the coaches spoke to the captains about, any other meetings between team, just individual members of the team and assistant coaches, individual members of the team and the coaches, especially because one of the first things that really happened this year as our first attempt to try and get some help was the captains went to a athletics administration member, and they talked to him and explained what was going on. This is the meeting where they brought up the speeding, and he told them that this is something that we need to work out between ourselves and the coaches. And we tried to do that with all the captains' meetings, with players coming up with and meeting with the coaches on their own, with the team meetings where we would come up with ideas, and then the captains would go and take those and meet with the coaches. We tried, but it seemed like almost every time after some of these meetings were had where we asked for a change, where we asked for something to be different, the coaches would, we would have a whole team meeting, have a film session, watch another failure montage, and we would be told that we were unaccountable. That the meetings where we ask for change just shows that we have no accountability in ourselves. And that that we need to be accountable for ourselves and our own mistakes and our own shortcomings, and not try and ask for changes with the coaches because they know what they're doing. And so after that is when we decided to take things a step further. Because of how things went in 2022 when the girls met with Athletic Director Golick, we knew that we would have to be really stringent in what we were doing, how we were doing it. We would need to document everything perfectly and as clearly as we could so that there were not any questions, that it was laid out, night and day, and that the abuse that we were experiencing could not be questioned. And we went in and we wanted to ask her for help. And our first step is always going to be, we did go to our coaches. We went to our coaches, and then we went to athletics administration, and that didn't change anything. And so now we're going to the athletic director, the person overseeing all athletics, hoping that this step in the chain would be the one to make a difference. And the two captains and myself went into the meeting, and I was not originally supposed to speak at all. I was supposed to sit there and take notes on everything, see what was going to happen. I helped the captains come up with what they wanted to say, just a short kind of intro where we clearly stated everything, and then we also very clearly asked Athletic Director Golick for help. We explained that we tried to do what we were asked and work things out with the coaches, but because of how things were going, we no longer felt that that was an appropriate avenue that we could comfortably take. And so now we are bringing it to her table and asking for the help and safety that her position should and could provide for us. And I just remember the look on my captains' faces after they said their part and asked her for help. And she responded with, "Okay, is that it?" And, the two captains are sophomores. At this point, they've had 1.5 seasons of playing collegiate athletics under their belt. They are 18 and 19, and they just had deer in the headlights look. Never once did we expect to bring everything to the athletic director. We'd already sent her the document that clearly had everything written out, had examples, had descriptions of what types of abuse were. We defined physical, emotional, mental abuse and laid out clear events and evidence. And we sent that to her, and she'd seen it. We sent it to her beforehand, before the meeting. We brought physical copies of it to the meeting in the off chance that she said she hadn't seen it. And when she responded with, "Is that it?" there was just a complete, no one knew what to do.
I think we just have.
We never expected this. We thought that the people in power would be the people who had the power to protect us, and that was their job. We thought that we would be able to go to those people and receive the help that we needed and receive the safety that we needed and deserved.
We just had this cringeworthy moment, I think, Jeremy and I think we just had this moment where, first of all, let me tell you, Emma, that you did everything right. You did everything that if you could have had a handbook available to you at that moment, that would say, do this, document, so that you don't have to keep reliving, your trauma, right? Document everything as best you can, put it into a timeline, or at least organize it somehow, that somebody could find. You and your teammates did everything that you would want somebody in your position, never want to be in that position, first of all, but secondly, you would maybe recommend to them to do. The fact that the people who are responsible for providing you with that help, I've said it before, the duty of care or the responsibility to ensure the safety of the athletes, because I've heard you say that a couple times now, that the safety was really kind of a primary, shared concern among the athletes experiencing all this abuse. The fact that I wrote down a word while you were speaking, retaliation, right? The fact that nobody's coming to your aid, or that you felt, you mentioned earlier that when you spoke up for your teammates, and yourself, right? But when you spoke up at first, you knew you did it knowing that I might not be included, on the travel roster, or I may not, I may be putting myself, right, Emma, in a kind of peculiar situation or awkward situation at the very least by speaking up, but you know what, this is the right thing to do. Okay, that is integrity, right? That should have been another word that I wrote down, but that is also retaliation, to not speak to you or to kick you out of a group chat, for something pretty innocuous, right? Something that, I send emoji. I'm like, once I figured out how to use them, I'm a little bit technologically, yeah, I send emojis to respond to people all the time, right? That's not like I'm insulting them, or, I'm acknowledging, hey, I got your email. And, oh, by the way, funny face tears, like that's funny or something. So, don't ever apologize, for your authenticity or the things that, that you do normally to show your support or camaraderie, or, be a part of your team. But, hear what we're talking about. And Jeremy, this is, I know we've seen a lot, but every morsel of information that I hear more about this case, like, it's just horrifying. This is almost the worst case scenario in every aspect of the reporting process, the complaint process, the, finding injunctive relief process, because let me just confirm this right now. Chris Gonzalez is still the head coach of the University of Idaho women's volleyball team. Is that correct? So what we're talking about
Yes.
is Emma and her teammates, the ones that haven't been lucky enough to transfer out or go into the portal, or what. The Emma and her teammates returned, about 3 weeks ago to campus, and are expected to be under the supervision of the same person, who allegedly, who's alleged to have impacted this abuse, right? Who dealt out this abuse in the same environment, in the same gym and practice facility and locker room and training room where all of this occurred. This to me, this is a huge, almost like, gosh, it's really negligent of the people in charge, whoever all those people are, to not see this as a bigger problem, right? If we were talking about this in a human resource lens, like if we were all coworkers maybe, or employees, and one of the first things that would happen, and Emma, Jeremy, and I both have experience with this, right? Running or working with other companies, but one of the first things that would happen is they try to separate the parties from each other, just to simply stop any of the interaction, from happening, or from it escalating, or any potential conflicts, or anything, right? Just to try to minimize the contact between everybody. But here, and again, following along the story and all the articles, like, you as a group, those of you returning for spring season, now in a smaller group, because spring is always smaller, right? You have students graduating, or people that have completed their eligibility, or such, small group workout. Can't
Or they all enter the transfer
Exactly.
portal.
It's already a
Yes.
small. So if you're not safe when all 18 athletes are reporting, then how are you expected to be safe when there's only maybe, half that many, right? Or, if you're position practicing, right? Because you can't really do full workouts right now, right? So if the middles are having a workout session or something, like, oh my God, you're even less safe now in this environment than you were when all of the things that you reported and documented and, God forbid, had to live through, when all of that was happening. So I know I'm ranting a little bit, because I'm just so, I do this for a living, and I'm stunned at the negligence of what's been happening, because you're still in effect, no matter what protective measures maybe have been put in place or what best practices, it doesn't seem like there are any best practices in this. You're still basically exposed or at the mercy of whether or not this same coach that abused you will keep your scholarship or not kick you off the team, or maybe some of these funky things that have been happening will happen again. And now we know that as early as the 2022 season, when he stepped on campus, that people were aware that this was happening long before you even got to the university. So your lived experience in 2023 could really have been avoided if somebody had taken note of this back in 2022 when it all happened. Right? I mean, fair to say.
Now, let me jump in on this, because maybe this will help paint the picture a little bit better. So, Emma, when the captains or athletes or players would talk to the team, any of the women would talk to the coaches, was there any sense of concern, or were the discussions ignored? Were the issues dismissed by the coaches, or did it just make the situation worse for the women on the team?
It was kind of a mix of dismissal and making the situation worse. During the conversations, the coaches seemed present, seemed to be having a discussion. But at one point, I know the captains went in and clearly expressed to the coaches that so many of the girls are playing in a constant state of fear because of how we were treated after we made one or two mistakes. And no sport can be played perfectly. And so even our coach said, we're trying to play an imperfect game as best we can. But when we made mistakes, or if one of his favorite players made a mistake and you were near one of the girls who were treated significantly worse, it would be some of those girls' fault. And they would be pulled out of the drill. They would be pulled off the court and not put back in. They would be belittled and berated. And so the captains went in and tried to have that discussion with the coaches and say, so many girls are playing with fear, it is incredibly detrimental to our ability to perform. And the coaches, from what I understand from talking with the captain, said, we hear you, we understand, we'll make some changes. And before practice, we were told that the practice that day of the meeting would be a knockout practice. So once you made a mistake, you were done. Which is the exact opposite of what we were trying to convey, what we were trying to do. And just another example of we tried and it did not work. It worked, it worked aversely. It was the exact opposite of what we were trying to do. We were trying to instill girls with confidence, not have them play in so much fear of being done with practice because of a mistake, being done with a drill and because of that mistake. Yeah.
So Emma, did the same thing happen when everyone went to the athletic director's office? Was the response almost identical to when you went to the coaches?
So it was only the three of us, and we'd sent out some emails the night before to the provost, the dean of students, the president, so that they knew they were also included in what was going on, and they knew that we were going to be having a meeting with the athletic director. And so the dean of students came to the meeting. He showed up. We had no idea he was going to be there. We were waiting in the hallway before the meeting, and we saw him, and one of the girls was like, "Oh my gosh, that's Blaine Eccles, the dean of students." And so in the meeting after Terry said, "Oh, is that it?" I stepped in, said a little bit more, spoke on that this situation warrants attention and action, and something needs to be done. We've heard, "Oh, we're here for you. We know what's going on. We're here. Our doors are open if you need anything." But those words mean nothing unless there is action taken, unless we experience some sort of change. And the dean of students at that point kind of stepped in a little bit more and took over the meeting a little bit, which I am grateful for, because he acknowledged that something needed to change, and he is the only one who provided any sort of assistance. We were assigned a case manager that we could reach out to and ask for help, or ask to attend like one-on-one meetings or small group meetings with the coaches. We were told that with the in-season practice schedule that she could not attend the practices or the films or travel with the team or any of those situations where we might really need someone there, because those are where most of the instances of abuse were happening. But it finally felt like this was one step. And, throughout this whole process, some of the girls have family members who are in the volleyball world. My mom's worked in HR before, and just kind of a variety of meeting of the minds. And we were connected with someone who at this point has become a very incredible mentor to us all, and really was able to guide us on the things we could do and affirm our experience as not okay. Because, when you go to the people in charge and ask for help and nothing changes, it does make you question yourself. It makes you question if your experience was that bad, if it was, if you're special enough to warrant the attention that you need, to warrant the safety. And so it was helpful having someone who knew and was able to both guide us and affirm that it was bad, affirm that everything we'd experienced was valid, and that our reactions, our emotions were all appropriate and acceptable. And we'd considered going to Title IX and the Office of Civil Rights and all of that and requesting an investigation, but because everyone knows they exist. But we really did not know what was going to happen, how a process like that would look. And that would be going to yet another step. We were really hoping that Terry Golick, the athletic director, athletics administration, would be kind of our last step, our final stepping stone. But when that ended up not being the case, then it was a regroup. We talked to the girls on the team and really kind of came up with a plan of action, and everyone who felt comfortable enough submitted a request for investigation against the coach. There are a lot of internationals on our team who are even now still concerned if they speak up, if they voice their opinions or thoughts or discomforts, that their status as international student, their scholarship will be taken away. And so a lot of people
was that
did
because
not...
something was said to them about it, or just the track record of everything else that has happened, the retaliation is most likely going to happen?
Kind of both. It was very much the track record of retaliation, but also during the season, Chris Gonzalez did very much say that he can say or do whatever he wants to the internationals because they can't leave.
And of course, he's already said that he knows and hears everything, right? He's already said this to you guys when you tried to discuss with him the first time, that he knows and sees everything, implying, I know when you're trying to ask for help, right?
Yes. And so then we got all of the requests for investigation filed. 4 of the returners, which included the 2 captains and myself, went and met with the school's Office of Civil Rights officer, and we decided that we wanted to pursue an investigation. The problem is their scope of the things they can investigate is incredibly limited. It falls under Title IX and, I think Title VI, where institutions that receive federal funds cannot discriminate based off of race, gender, national origin, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. And the abuse we are experiencing, is not necessarily based on those things. So even though we had an 11-page document of examples of everything that had happened, of clear definitions of physical, emotional, mental abuse, the we were only able to narrow it down, or we were only able to expand it to four things that they were actually able to investigate. So four out of the countless instances, because there was no there's no availability of, like, for recourse for us as student athletes. To There's no one in the school who, once you go past the athletic director, there's no one in the school, there's no one there that will help us for things like abuse,
Right.
for
Right.
harassment. As student athletes, we're not protected under state employment law, so we can't really pursue anything on that front. We can There's no officer, there's no office of place we can go that has the responsibility to protect us outside of Title IX and Title VI. And so,
I would dispute that, Emma, because there are offices there that are supposed to be protecting you. Like the dean of students would be a perfect example. The chancellor of the school would be an example. The state of Idaho higher education board, or whatever it is that they're called in Idaho. There are people in place there, and one of which was in one of your meetings. And maybe there is work being done behind the scenes that maybe we're not aware of right now. But there are people there. It's just if they choose to help or choose not to help.
Right.
yeah.
That's up to them. But yes, it's extraordinarily difficult. Civil rights violations. In this particular situation, he's it's a completely toxic and abusive situation and culture that you're in. But is it violating your civil rights? I'm not there. I don't know. But just like you said, there's only four things they could have investigated. You're not a state employee, so they can't investigate. I mean, there's so many different things where all of this that is happening is wrong. Um, I mean, just on so many levels, but at the same time, you can't get any one person to stop and say, wait a second, we need to take a look at this from a higher level and holistically, and then, take action from there. And unfortunately, and this just doesn't happen with you as a sports team. It happens in all areas, in all industries, and it's extraordinarily disappointing and hurtful, and it just continues to hurt the people that are adversely impacted. So I'm sorry about that. That no one else in the um, at the university is taking the time to take a look at this, even if it's to take a look at it and to tell all the athletes, oh, well, there's nothing we could do, or we're choosing not to do something, at least to, recognize that you're saying something and you're being heard. And then the school can say, we are going to do something about it, or we're choosing not to do something about it. And I think that would definitely go a long way, but
Yes.
it still won't solve the problem. So when you went to the coaches, there was retaliation. When you went to the athletic director, I'm assuming there was a retaliation. Okay.
Yes, it
So if
was.
the
We
okay.
Yeah, it wasn't very clear, but it was obvious that he knew that the three of us had gone to the athletic director, despite very clearly asking the athletic director and informing her that we feared retaliation if this got back to him. It it got
Yeah.
back to him.
So are you going to be retaliated for coming on our show today?
At this point, no. I Hopefully, with the current investigation that's going on, there we with the start of the investigation, we asked that it would be delayed until the end of season to protect the entire team against retaliation, and because the 5 of our names would be released to the coach as the ones who initiated the investigation and brought up the complaints, and he would have seen the complaints. And so we asked that the investigation wait until, the moment the season was over. And once the investigation started, the 5 complainants, those of us who had their names released, did get a partial no contact protection order put in place for the duration of the investigation. So if he wanted to contact us, someone else would have to be in a group chat. But this didn't extend to practices. This didn't extend to any physical activities, which was a big concern of ours. But at that point, it was Thanksgiving, it was almost finals and Christmas break or, holiday vacation. And so volleyball was over and we did not have those interactions. Once we came back to campus, though, and after we had gone to the media and it had come out publicly and our names were released in the article, with our permission, of course, but our names were there. He knew the people who were speaking out against him, and nothing had changed. Us going public was not what we wanted to happen. It was supposed to be the big red final detonation button. It was something that we weren't going to do unless we felt like we absolutely had to. And never once did we think that once we went to the media and told our story that we would have to return to spring practices with Chris as the head coach, our care being placed back into his hands daily. And so as the time drew near, our concerns increased. We spoke more with kind of the relevant people. There was a meeting with the dean of students, the entire team, and the athletic director, which amounted to the school has therapists in place if you need. And then the case manager who was assigned to us after the original meeting is now attending every practice. But for those of us who have been outspoken, who are being the voices for the team, it still was a immense source of stress and concern and anxiety that we would have to go back and play whatever twisted game he came up with while he was in power and we were the athletes. And so we spoke with the lead of the investigation, and we asked that our partial no contact protection order be expanded. We verbally requested that he be put on leave because that is not something that we should have had to ask for. But we also felt that we could not keep complaining that he wasn't on leave or being confused that he wasn't on leave if we didn't say that we were uncomfortable returning. So we made that very clear. And we were told that based on the civil rights investigation, he could not be put on leave, that the allegations were not to a concerning enough level that he would be put on leave, and that the investigation that was added on through the school that looked into team climate and culture concerns, it was up to the athletics department if they were going to put him on leave for that aspect of the investigation, which did not happen and would not happen. So then we found a third option where players who feel the need to, it was just going to include the 5 complainants with our names released, but we made sure that it applies to everyone on the team. Because even though they have not necessarily been put in articles with their names, they've been a part of this process. And so every single person on the team can now opt out of practice with no consequences, with no risk to their scholarship, anything like that. And if Chris Gonzalez is there, we do not have to be. And it's just an individual basis that we can choose to do. Myself and the other complainants who are still present have. One of them transferred, and now currently the team who has 12 people on the roster is practicing with 6.
So you say that there's going to be nothing bad that happens to players that don't come to practice. Do you think that's wholly accurate? Do you think that the coach will remember who didn't show up to practice? Do you think the school will remember who didn't show up to practice? What are your thoughts concerning that?
I think so. I definitely think, because we have to notify people if we are choosing to opt out, and so there's definitely a record of that. And, like I've said before, Chris Gonzalez is a smart person. He will remember who didn't show up to practice. He will remember who came to a few practices and then decided to opt out. And so even though for the duration of the investigation we do not have to attend practice, once the investigation's over, it's just a big question mark right now, because we don't know what's going to happen. Even the girls who are practicing say it's frustrating. You can't practice playing volleyball when you have 6 people. Every practice is a small groups practice. People are having to play positions that they will never play in a game, that they have never played before. We've heard that it's not being taken seriously. He brings his dog to the practice and lets it run around off leash under the nets while drills are happening. And it's a variety of stuff like that just, nothing good is happening in this spring semester. Skill development didn't happen in the fall. Fundamentals were not reviewed, were not taught. And so now in the spring, when there's only 6 people, it's going to continue like this. Individual skills are not going to improve. The team as a whole, with half of the team not practicing, it's not going to get better. And it's not, he's going to remember. If he stays, if nothing changes, he's absolutely going to remember. And in his head, he always tells us the international students are more committed to the sport. And that's, kind of a direct insult to all of the girls who aren't internationals. But when you look at the girls who are still practicing, it is the internationals. Because if they are not on full scholarship, they cannot attend school here. And he will remember. And so when the investigation's over, he might not say, I'm taking your scholarship because you participated in the investigation. It'll be, I'm taking your scholarship because I don't think you're a good fit for the team, which at this point is technically allowed, and they have to go home.
Now, have you heard any discussion between other athletes that already were picked up by another school in the transfer portal or who are currently in the transfer portal? Are there any fears that the coach might reach out to the other coaches to talk to that coach about, you need to watch out for her, or she can't be trusted? Or is there any fear for that, or is no one really concerned about that at this point?
So all of the girls who entered the transfer portal after the end of the season that I know of, I think except for one, have all already signed for the team, transferred, and are now practicing and playing for that school. But there was definitely a lot of questions about, when we enter the transfer portal, any coach that's doing their due diligence will talk to the coach that they played under beforehand. And so if a player speaks out, then it is so easy for that coach to then disparage that player to any potential new coach. And that was a big concern for a lot of the girls, and honestly a risk entering the portal.
Well, I think it's a valid concern, because I'll tell you, Jeremy, I'm glad you just asked that question. So if we look back in 2022, right? I don't know any of these girls, on the team from 2022, but I do know people who either coach them or know them, or were, I think, trying to assist them in their transfer process. And I did get a call about one of them. I'm not in the coaching, world anymore, but I do consider, that there are a number of friends, colleagues, associates in that world. And I did get a call from a coaching friend of mine at the club level who, said there's this young woman, she's trying to transfer. It's a kind of a delicate situation, and I didn't know that what her situation exactly was. And when I called, to try to help, maybe connect the dots, like what kind of school she's looking for academically and all that, I was literally told by the coach of the university she really wanted to go to that, well, I saw her in the portal and I talked to the head coach at the University of Idaho, and he told me she was lazy, had an attitude problem, she was an academic nightmare, she was ineligible, however she put it. And it turns out, when I went back, to verify those facts with the person who'd reached out to me, none of that was true. She was actually one of the better statistically performing athletes on the team that year. Had a fantastic attitude in terms of the coaches that were, kind of personally and engaged with her, right, and had coached her in previous seasons, and and academically was just fine. There would be no reason. So the fear that Emma, just shared with us of women that were, possibly looking to transfer or may still be looking to transfer, like, that's real, right? That's retaliation in, maybe a more subtle form, but that is massive retaliation. And the thing to highlight here is, the athletes, and let's remember we talked about their age, right? There's a particularly young group of women because everybody transferred who was upperclassmen last year. And thank God Emma came in because, she has some experience. But these are young people, right, who need guidance, right, who deserve guidance, right, who were left in the care of, these athletic administrators who do have the power. I mean, we did just hear, they do have the power to put him on some sort of restriction or administrative leave. The young people are doing the right thing here. And so why, again, you've pointed out, like, we don't know, right, what's going on inside the university or the athletic administration. I don't know this athletic director. I am aware of who Chris Gonzalez is, and many moons ago had crossed paths. And I tell you, the number one thing that I hear from people who have now read this article worldwide, by the way, is that I can't believe they hired him in the first place, and I'm not at all surprised by what I'm hearing now or reading, in the Orange County Register article. That's a bit horrifying, So giving Emma a little break to catch her breath, I want to tell you a couple of things, Emma, and please pass this along, to your teammates as well. The impact of your voice and speaking up and going through all of these things that you've shared with us, which I'm sure is just a scratch on the surface, of the things that you've endured, right? Not only the abuse itself, but just trying to figure out, like, where do we go for help, right? How do we get something to happen here, right? The impact of that is showing up, and I'll give you a couple examples. And again, I'm outside the scope now of, collegiate volleyball and coaching and such, but a couple examples I wanted to share with you while we have you, on the podcast. I've had former national team athletes, Olympians alike, medal winners, national team alumni reach out or comment, after seeing your article that, oh my God, I can't believe these young women are going through the same thing that I did, when I played, under this particular coach. We've had coaches from outside. I deal mostly in international volleyball, so domestically I'm not as well connected. But from the international side of things, I've had coaches coaching pro teams saying, we're tough with our professional athletes, but we're not abusive. Like, that's not okay. Don't categorize us, as being abusers simply because one person says, in Europe, this is how it is. In Japan, this is how it is. And, that may be the case. And there may be the abuse out there for sure, but it's highlighted, it's amplified, the need for people to have this important conversation. And the last point that I want to share with you, you're a club volleyball, you're from club volleyball, right? You grew up in the club volleyball system and spent all those weekends at the convention centers and buying the t-shirts and the sweatshirts and everything else. This next generation of young athletes, that are right now are kind of they're at the beginning end of their club, season, right? Or the start rather, of their club season. Um, I'm getting outrage from parents that I don't even know that will drop a line on social media or something after seeing a link. Tried to share the article and some of your experiences, and they say this article had just became required reading in our club for parents, right, to help identify not only the signs of abuse, but sort of as like a case study, like what should we do? Where did the adults in this conversation and the administrators and the people in charge who get paid to have a duty of care for athletes, where did they fail, right? So that we know not to do that. And I don't want to send my
Exactly.
child to the University of Idaho women's. I had somebody just tell me that, a woman who's a very, very close friend of mine, whose daughter is 11 and just starting volleyball. And she goes, well, we already scratched out the University of Idaho women's volleyball program from our potential list because we don't want our child to have to go through this. And the people in charge don't have the right reaction, right? So, um, your voice has carried far and wide, and the voice of your teammates as well. So, on behalf of everybody in the community that's talking about this very difficult subject right now, I mean, thank you. If nobody said that to you before, thank you, because by you standing up for yourself and putting value on you, and your experience and your worth, right? And keeping your space, you have, by example, shared with other people that it's okay for them to do the same if they find themselves, in the same situation. So huge thank you to your teammates, your parents, everybody who's been involved on your side to help, bring this really horrible situation, to light. We need to keep the story alive, right? Because it really is quite an important lesson for everybody involved in athletics, period, whether you're a spectator, a coach, an administrator, no matter what role you play, or just a fan, just a great big fan, right? I mean, it's everybody plays a role in the responsibility of keeping the athletes safe, right? Keeping everything athlete centered, victim centered, trauma informed. These are not just words and phrases and platitudes. These are actual things. And outing complainants to the actual alleged abuser in this way so that they suffer retaliation is not okay. So Jeremy, I throw it to you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or Emma.
when we when we started this thing, obviously we never really intended obviously we didn't really want to go public with it. We'd hoped it could be dealt with internally and appropriately. Um, but now that it's gotten this big, I've also received messages from parents and athletes and, just strangers who aren't even athletes but have their own experience with abuse, just reaching out. And as much of a really awful and unfortunate situation we've been in and a very preventable path that we've had to take, it's something that no one, athlete or not, should ever have to question the validity of their experience. And if something is wrong, trust yourself, trust the people around you. And that's something that we've definitely learned at this point is we we're young women, yes, but we also are aware of what's okay and what's not okay. And, the questioning of our experience only set us behind. And by not taking action sooner, by not doing these things sooner, because we were unsure, because we didn't know what to do, because we didn't know who to ask for help, all of those things, it's something that no athlete should ever experience, that no person should ever experience. They shouldn't feel like they have no options for recourse, that they don't have people to reach out to and figure out what to do. And so, that's just something that has become incredibly apparent throughout this whole process.
Emma, we would love to spend a lot more time with you, not only to hear about your lived experience, but as you as an incredible human being and you know just someone who cares so much about her teammates. I should have started this episode with stating, and I apologize for this, that that I didn't say earlier is that your lived experience is real. It did happen. Don't let anyone say anything or do anything that makes you question that. And it's not only for you; it's for your teammates. But it did happen. Everything that you're saying is identical to every single person I've interviewed for my doctoral research, which took many years. And I had over 1,000 people that participate in my research. The situation's the same. It just looks different for each one. But this situation definitely happened to you. And it wasn't because of you, of who you are. It's because of the toxic and abusive person and the support people who were enabling that. It's because of them. It's not because of you and your teammates. Regardless if you said something or stood up to defend yourself or whatever the case may be, it's not anything you did. It's other people, and I could go on for hours about why that is. But narcissism is obviously a huge thing. That, and we can talk about that at a later time. But before we do close up this episode, I want to know if you had a closing statement, whether it's for your teammates, coaches, the university, or even fellow athletes not on your team, just fellow volleyball players or athletes in the U.S. or around the world. Do you have something to say? A closing statement, something that you want people to remember leaving this episode?
I think the majority of this experience through University of Idaho volleyball has come through the coach. And coaching is, at this day and age, a much more elevated position and role to hold than it was however many years ago. And I think it's incredibly important to recognize that coaching is an evolving profession, an evolving profession. And the things that were acceptable whenever are more is being known, more is being learned. And we have moved past behaviors that would have been okay, that would have been kind of swept under the rug. And coaches now hold a much more prominent role in an athlete's life than before. They are, they're the guide in the athletic avenues, the guide and the coach for those physical activities, but also, off the court. They, from a young age, are becoming incredibly impactful in any athlete's life. And even at the collegiate level, all of the people, regardless of the wins and losses, my friends that I know who, some of them have played for incredible teams. Some of them have played for teams that I think they won, 3 times. But the things that stick with you are the people, the coaches, how you were treated, the opportunities that they gave you for personal growth, and the encouragement and support they provided you. And those are the things that are starting to matter more and more. And from an objective point of view, I definitely understand coaching at a collegiate level is potentially it's incredibly difficult. You're trying to make a living off of 18 to 22-year-old young athletes. And that's obviously not always easy, but at the same time, you are gifted an amazing opportunity to have incredible positive impacts. And that's not something that, yeah, sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about, Emma. That was a great closing statement. Thank you very much for joining us on the Culture and Sports podcast. We're going to continue to diving deeper into this story as it develops, and we have dedicated our entire season 4 to that. So thank you again for coming on, and I really hope that things will positively change for you and your teammates there. And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Culture in Sports podcast. We hope that this episode has started an internal dialogue, or even one with your team, about the importance of leadership and organizational culture. If you'd like to learn more about culture in sports, the Culture in Sports podcast, or other programs, go to cultureinsports.com, where there is a wealth of resources, articles, research, podcasts, video shows, webinars, and courses. And don't forget to connect with us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn at Culture in Sports, and on Twitter at Culture in Sport. Thank you for tuning in to the Culture in Sports podcast.